Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Tadani Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupa Sagrajata Sahakana Radhanathan Tham Sajivam Sakaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahakana Lavita Sri Vishatan Vitanscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Kotesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I sincerely welcome everyone to Sri Radha Gopinath Temple for our Sunday festival. Today we are very grateful that His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada has so kindly sent to us one of his very dearmost disciples who, in the earliest moments of Srila Prabhupada's mission in the West, from the end of 1966, beginning of 1967, she and a small handful of others dedicated their lives, their body, mind, words, and their very souls to assist him. And the way they did it is such a great inspiration that will be a legacy for many generations to come. They risked everything to help Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada, seeing how much they trusted his guidance as a representative of Krishna, he puts such great trust in them. And in doing so, we're able to start an incredible temple in San Francisco, then in London, then was called by Srila Prabhupada to establish our mission in India, and particularly Her Grace Malati Devi Prabhu. She was the first mother giving birth to a child in Prabhupada's society. She was Prabhupada's personal cook, would lead kirtan, would preach, would organize, would manage. And today, over 40 years later, she's a great leader of our society, traveling around America, various parts of the world, helping to solve so many problems, inspiring so many people's hearts. At one time, Srila Prabhupada told his own godbrothers, senior sannyasis of the Gaudiya Math, he said to them about Malati, who was serving prasad, he said, she loves me so much that she's willing to die for my sake. And for Prabhupada to say that about a lady to the senior most staunch sannyasis on the planet was a very great tribute to her devotion. Let us welcome Malati Devi to Radha Gopinath Temple.
I'm thinking after he spoke like that I should be quiet so that I don't show him as speaking untruth.
Nobody is worried about that.
We've been reading or hearing about Parsuram, who acted very swiftly to eradicate the influence of the misguided Kshatriyas all over the world, and in doing so he changed the course of history at that time. And I was reflecting this morning how Srila Prabhupada was acting also in such a fearless manner against the current of a very freewheeling modern lifestyle that was exemplified very predominantly at that time by the hippie movement. Although he didn't arrive on a white horse, instead he crossed the ocean on a very old, tired freighter that was soon retired to the scrapyard. And he descended down the gangplank of that ship into an unknown environment with no one to meet or greet him. But in a very swift fashion, he captured the hearts of misguided young men and women using the weapon of truth and love. And in doing so, he eradicated the sinful enemies of pious living by establishing roots of Dharma, by introducing regulative principles, and causing a profound change individually and collectively in the lives of young people of that moment and into the present and into the future. Nobody really joined the Hare Krishna movement as a saint. But we have seen many such saints emerge. But who would imagine that a person of small stature, physically speaking, At the moment I'm compiling memories from his remaining female disciples. And it is very interesting to note as I do these interviews that there are certain repeated observances and experiences that, establish a pattern. And not only a pattern, but a picture that gives an accurate picture. So repeatedly you hear, upon first viewing or first seeing Srila Prabhupada, how surprised one was to see that he was not an immense personality by his physical stature. You hear how he was glowing. It's a common word. He was glowing. He was radiant. How he was not walking, or he did not appear to walk in an ordinary manner. He was gliding. No, this becomes like commonly heard. So we can accept this was true. This was a fact. But what did this mean? Who was this person who came like that among us? And as he changed our lives in a very total manner, like turning the page, when you're reading a book, you turn the page and there's a new chapter emerges. So, when you turn the page from one chapter to the next, there's a closing of the old chapter, the opening of the new chapter. So his entry, or his appearance into the Western world, was the closing of a chapter in Gaudiya Vaishnava history, and it was opening a new chapter in Gaudiya Vaishnava history, but also in the lives of the first of people of the Western world, and then as the waves started coming back to the Eastern world, it began changing the lives of all the members, all the residents, all the citizens of the ancient world of India, which was fast becoming modernized. And he was doing it in a very, you could say, spontaneous manner. So not that he had any strategic planning meetings with anyone before he came, and certainly he wasn't getting any encouragement from anyone before he came, because the sadhus at that time, they considered leaving India to be something impious. If you were a sadhu, you didn't leave India. You stayed here because this was the pious land. And that was wonderful in one respect. But given that Lord Chaitanya said his name would be spread in every town and village, someone had to take the risk. And someone had to have at least a vision. The vision originated with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who grasped that there was a reality to having the Lord's names chanted in every town and village. So much so, he envisioned that the members of these foreign towns and villages would return to the land of Nadia and would be seen there in Nadia chanting Hari Bol, Hari Bol. And that was rather interesting, because at that time, in the early to mid 1800s, international travel was not a common occurrence. There was no really economical or practical means for that. So then he passed that vision on to his son, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And by the inconceivable compassion and mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that message was passed on to a young man who was recently married, who became His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And his arrival on a very wet, cloudy, foggy morning in September 17th of 1965 in Boston, this is the beginning of the new chapter in Gaudiya Vaishnava history, and for all of us who forever become His followers, His students, His followers, that day and that moment also changed our lives. All of you are sitting here, your life has been changed by that moment. Sometimes, people who are interested in architecture, they'll contemplate who built the house, who created this building, and they're interested in the dynamics of that architectural establishment, and somewhat of the person who was the architect behind it. So we have Srila Prabhupada, a spiritual architect who is responsible for, at this point, over 420 temples, I'm told, around the world, and the architect of hundreds and thousands and millions of lives that were lost, bewildered, stolen by illusion in one form or the other, who have returned to a point of sanity due to the Krishna consciousness movement, and for those fortunate souls, of whom there are so many, that were already in a pious mode, in a mode of goodness lifestyle, but still drifting, He gave direction. So we have much to be grateful for, much to be thankful for. And we should really consider deeply the personality, the architecture behind all of this. There are many saintly people in this world. There have been saintly people in the past, and there will be saintly people in the future. But among these saintly people, who has actually done something that is so significant as to change the course in history and create a spiritual movement that will eventually be a shelter for, it is already a shelter, but a recognized shelter, a tangible shelter into the future as Kali Yuga progresses. When Parasuram killed all these Kshatriyas 21 times over, it caused a certain stability at the time. But the emergence of Kali Yuga has created a situation that far exceeds even that situation. India is considered to be one of the few remaining lands of piety. But I can see myself, since first coming here in 1970 to this date, how quickly, how swiftly, how ruthlessly Kali Yuga is acting. Many times when I'm traveling from one place to the other through Bombay or Delhi, Calcutta, you feel bewildered. Am I in India? Am I in New York? Am I in London? Because the mood is so different than it was. And I remember Srila Prabhupada, how he left India in 1965. He was living in Sri Vrindavan Dham, in Radha Damodar Temple. You go to Vrindavan now, and there's high-rise, multi-story buildings with security gates and elevators. The land where the cows and the peacocks were walking is covered with big buildings. You don't even see peacocks anywhere near Vrindavan Temple anymore. But they used to be there. And the Yamuna River was so beautifully wandering through Vrindavan. And now it's dammed up, it's filled with all kinds of pollution. And they're trying to enforce a bridge across the river so that people can easily invade Vrindavan in their big cars. At that time, it was hardly any cars entered. There was just a few little rickshaws. There was no big sound speakers except on a special occasion. And the electricity only worked. In 1963, Srila Prabhupada told us they first put electricity in Vrindavan. So it wasn't consistent. It was 2 or 3 hours a day sporadically. Such a peaceful, gentle place. And Srila Prabhupada was there in Radha Damodar temple, gazing out on the samadhis, taking inspiration from Srila Rupa Goswami. And he was willing to leave all of that behind, just to bring the message of Mahaprabhu to the forefront and to the attention of the world. And we are the beneficiaries of that most selfless sacrifice that he offered at an advanced age. So he's not just another saintly person. In order to actually fulfill this mission, he had to be empowered by the Supreme Lord. This is a fact that is stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which it states that if one is to be successful in preaching the Sankirtan movement, they must be empowered by the Supreme Lord. So Srila Prabhupada, in this empowerment, is understood to be Shaktavesh Avatar, one who is empowered for a specific mission by the Supreme Lord. Srila Prabhupada himself states, I have not done anything wonderful. If it appears that I have done something wonderful, it is only that I have followed the instruction of my spiritual master, and I have not deviated or changed anything. This is actually a very important instruction for all of us who are coming as the caretakers of the Hare Krishna movement. Srila Prabhupada followed his spiritual master's instructions and did not change anything. And he expects the same of us. He once told us that if even one person comes and changes even one word of what I have instructed you, the whole thing will be spoiled. No. So we have a great legacy that is coming into our care. Many of us who were there in the beginning are departing. And just like the head of the house hands his affairs over to his children, Srila Prabhupada handed his affairs over to us, and we in turn are handing the affairs over to all of you. So my humble request is to accept this responsibility in a very mature manner, study Srila Prabhupada's books very carefully, and do not deviate from his instructions, as he did not deviate from his spiritual master's instructions. I would like to end with a small, I won't correct what he said, Srila Prabhupada said, but I will just relate with the exact words what he did say. Many times we are asked as disciples of Srila Prabhupada, what are the most memorable or the most profound message or instructions? And in one level I will say that it's hard to quantify, this is more important, this instruction or this experience was more important, because Srila Prabhupada at every moment was giving us instructions great and small, to guide us back home, back to Godhead. But the situation that he was referring to happened in Mayapur at a time when Mayapur was yet to be developed. At the time, there was only rice paddies, and it was very beautiful. And electricity was very rare. It was really rural, and now you hear the green, where the word green is a big buzzword. But really, Mayapur was really green at that time, just rice paddies. Bhaktisiddhanta Road was a dirt road, and there weren't any little tin shops. There weren't the chai wallas, or there wasn't any wallas. It was just the Gaudiya Math temples. And then, by the inconceivable vision of Srila Prabhupada to fulfill the vision of Srila Bhaktivinoda, we acquired this land. So ISKCON at that time consisted of rice paddies in one little thatched roofed shack. And we held a big festival there. We thought it was big. At least 50 of us attended from different parts of the world. And we thought that was big at the time. Living in tents that became very wet when it rained. And we had one source of water. It was a hand water pump that is still there in front of that. I think I saw it this time in front of the original Bhajan Kutir where Srila Prabhupada resided. So as his cook, I also had to do house cleaning and shopping. But they didn't have any shopping in Mayapur, so that meant you had to take a boat and go across the river to Navadvip. And nothing was easy. Nothing's ever easy in this material world, even when you're trying to serve the Supreme Lord and the Supreme Guru. Nothing is ever easy. So I'm just mentioning that in case sometimes people get bewildered. They come to spiritual life and they're thinking everything's going to be real smooth. And actually, it can be really smooth when the consciousness is corrected. But as long as the consciousness is a little bit out of kilter, things will be a little out of kilter, or even a lot out of kilter. So it was, I'm there with my husband, who is Srila Prabhupada's secretary. I think you all know His Grace, Sundar Prabhu. And we had a small daughter, Saraswati Devi, who was around 3 years old at that time. So I'm the mother, I'm the wife, and I'm the cook of Srila Prabhupada. And living in a tent without any, we didn't have any facilities to speak of. So it was somewhat difficult. And we also didn't have much money, So even though I'm cooking for Srila Prabhupada, when I would go to the treasurer to get Lakshmi to do the shopping, he was really tough, because the duty of the treasurer is to guard the treasury. So he has one word that's very prominent, and it's no. He would ask, I need this much, no. And then, back and forth. So that was like kind of the starting of the day. And then I'd have to get on this boat to Navadvip, and these people were just very hostile and trying to, because we were basically the first group Western people they had seen, and they're just thinking, wow, they must, they were imagining they were going to get rich and retire from us. So they would exploit the prices. But my treasurer had only given me enough for the local price. So there would be a really big fight to get on that boat and cross the river to go shopping. And on the other side, there was more fights with the rickshaw wallahs to go to the sabji market, with the sabji wallahs, with the fruit wallahs, with the doodh wallahs, with every wallah. So the whole morning was like a battle. And then I'd come back and the same thing all over again. And I would have to cook. There was a little bucket with some rocks in it that I would put some cow dung and whatever else I could get to make a fire. And there was one kerosene stove that you would pump it up, light a match, and it would blow up in your face. And this is what I had to cook with, I had one little knife on a stand, a foot knife. There was no nice counter with a sink. There was one bucket with water in it, which I had to share with Srila Prabhupada's servant, who used it to also heat the water for Srila Prabhupada's bath after his massage. So he would take one of my sources of heat to heat the water and my source of water. So things were quite tightly balanced at that point. So my meditation every single day was in my mind, just not only day, even at night I'd be sleeping thinking, how can I please Srila Prabhupada? How can I please him? And I really wanted to do things perfectly according to his standard and his desire. So this was the meditation. And each day I'm thinking, how can this, I hope this is right. And he would tell me some small detail about the cooking, And it seemed to me that each day there was something that wasn't quite right. So along with all the other issues, taking care of husband and child and the shopping, I started thinking, I'm not doing this very well. There's always something wrong, and maybe I shouldn't even be doing it. Maybe somebody else should be doing it. Because the goal was to satisfy the spiritual master, and it didn't seem I was doing that in a very efficient manner. So I had the idea that I'll get somebody else to cook for him. That would be the best solution. So as soon as I thought that, I actually started feeling a little less stressed out. And I thought, the next day I'll tell him that I'm going to get someone else to cook for him, and that will solve the problem of my mistakes. So it so happened the next day I found out that his godbrothers were coming to lunch. So I thought, well, for sure he won't have me cook today anyway, because these men are coming. And in fact, there had been a lot of criticisms about the Western devotees being in Mayapur, but one of them was that there was a female cooking for Srila Prabhupada. That's some mild criticism, and it had reached our ears. So I thought, under the circumstances, I certainly won't be cooking today, so I'll tell him tomorrow. And just as I'm thinking like that, I hear that he's calling me, so I entered, and he just started telling me what he wanted for lunch that day. So I thought, okay, well, I'll cook today, but I'll tell him tomorrow that I'm going to get another cook. So another devotee, His Grace Anand Prabhu, who was a very, very saintly elderly Vaishnava, he cooked for the other guests who were coming. But I cooked for Srila Prabhupada. And when I was finished, I was normally I would bring him his plate, that was normal, but I thought today probably somebody else would take it, but nobody came to take it, so I understood I was going to have to bring that plate in. So there was a little burlap sack that served as a curtain between the front part of the kutir, where His Divine Grace would sleep and eat and meet people, and the very small space in the back that was used for his various services. So I lifted up that curtain, and I saw Srila Prabhupada sitting at the end of the kutir. And once again, I have to say, he was glowing. He was very effulgent. And sitting on each side of him, as I remember, there were 4 godbrothers. So they were 2 and 2, and he was at the end. And I remember very quickly thinking, he's like a diamond. And when you see a diamond just in normal, a little diamond in your hand, it's very beautiful. It's a diamond, and there's a value to a diamond that's beyond compare. But when you place a diamond in a setting, the setting enhances the beauty of the diamond. So I was feeling like that Srila Prabhupada, in this setting, with his two godbrothers, 2 and 2 on each side, that was like the setting, and he was like this beautiful diamond. But I was feeling very intimidated to enter that room. So I took my sari and I completely covered myself, like you could say Muslim style. You couldn't see any of my body. And I was on my elbows, my hands were reaching out and I'm on my knees. I didn't walk in, it was like on my hands and knees, but because my hands had the plate, I'm on my elbows. And I entered that room and I went up to Srila Prabhupada like that, and I put the plate down and I started to back out. And I heard him say, "Yes, she cooks for me." And I criticized her. But the minute he said that, the defect in my consciousness was revealed. Because although I hadn't said anything at all to him, he understood that I had a defect in my consciousness. And by that defect, he was able to understand how to correct me. So by using this word criticism, he immediately corrected me. Because I was thinking, I want to please him, I want to please him. So he was telling me each day, he was correcting small things. Perhaps you can say they were small things, but because I was in my mind and heart thinking how to please him, he was giving the correction. If you want to please somebody, then it means doing it exactly how they would desire. But I was receiving as criticism. That was my defect. And I was misevaluating the role of the spiritual master. So he said, "Yes, she cooks for me," and I criticize her. But then he said, "But she would slit her throat for me, and I would do the same for her." So he was speaking about me, and that was true. But he was also speaking about all of us, because it's exactly how it was. We could do anything and go anywhere fearlessly because we were following the most fearless leader. And he could ask us to do anything, and we would, without question, do it. Not because we had become zombies, or because we had no mind of our own left, but because we understood that here was a pure devotee of the Lord, and he was offering to take us back to Godhead. And anything he might ask of us was only a small indication of what we could do to serve him and please him. And by doing so, we might, maybe in this lifetime, make it closer back to Godhead by pleasing him. That he had no selfish motive, no selfish intention in his entire body. That he was only giving us pure, unalloyed love. And it was love that we had never experienced before, not even from our parents or anyone else. So we were willing to serve him. Yes, we were sold out, but we were sold out to his love. So he said that about me, but it was really about all of us. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Malati Devi. What Malati Devi has shared with us is very much the spirit and the power that brought the path of bhakti to the world and to each of our hearts. Srila Prabhupada, we learn from such narrations because he gave in such a totally selfless, compassionate spirit. He conquered people's hearts. And they wanted to do anything and everything to assist him. I have heard some recordings of Srila Prabhupada here in Bombay, where he was speaking to some very wealthy industrialist people. And he was saying, really, what is bhakti? Very humbly, honestly, he told that he left India with 40 rupees, which at that time was equivalent to $7. But he couldn't exchange it, because in those days no one heard of a rupee. No one wanted a rupee in the Western world. Some years later, when he returned to India, he still had the same 40 rupees. 38 days on a cargo ship. When he arrived in Boston Harbor on that foggy day that Malati Devi was telling us about, he signed a letter to Krishna, a beautiful prayer. Your insignificant beggar, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So he was explaining like this. When he came to the Western world, America, which at that time was the wealthiest country on the planet, hardly any Indians were in America. The first Indian I ever met in my life was at the border of India. And it was not a very good experience. He was in a very strange land. And all of his followers, most of them were coming from middle class, upper class families. By Indian standards, most of the families of those followers of Prabhupada were tremendously wealthy in those days. And Srila Prabhupada had nothing material to give them. He was living in the Bowery, a ghetto of New York. He had nothing material. His Holiness Mukunda Maharaj and his then wife Janaki Devi, they arranged for Prabhupada to get a little storefront on 2nd Avenue in the Lower East Side because he had no place to live. He had nothing. He was 70 years old. He was just giving Krishna, and giving Krishna. He was glowing with Krishna's grace. And it manifested through his words, through his glance, through his smile, through his gestures. He had nothing else but Krishna. He was telling these industrialists in Bombay, I started like that. I was a beggar who hardly knew their language, an old man, and now they are doing anything for me. Opening centers, building temples. I'm not good with numbers, but Prabhupada told these people what the expenditures were every day in his society. So many lakhs of rupees, he said, we are spending every day. And hundreds of people, young, wealthy American families will do anything for me. They were impressed. Because usually to start a business, you need some initial investment to grow. And Prabhupada was doing so much for so many people, so many centers, so many temples, so many books. And what was his investment? Malati Devi told us. He simply repeated the words of his Gurudev with total faith and with total compassion for all of us. And that inspired the devotees to leave their beautiful homes and sleep on the floor with 15 other people on the same floor in the winter with no heat. And the winter in New York is pretty cold, snow, way below 0 Celsius style. Eating off little pieces of plastic. They would just have plastic paper they used for plates. They couldn't afford plates. And they were happy. Not only happy, they were in ecstasy. So happy that anyone who saw them wanted to do whatever they were doing. And after just a couple years, every temple that was opening was overflowing with devotees in America and Europe. Prabhupada had nothing material to give them. But he gave them Krishna's love. He gave them his compassion. And everyone understood there is nothing more valuable. There is no greater treasure than this. They were willing to give everything and anything to receive it. And they did. Srila Prabhupada said that Malati Devi was willing to die for him and he was willing to die for her. And he meant that literally, because it was true. And although Malati Devi is saying he meant that for all of us, he did. but he especially meant it for her. He was willing to do that for all of us. That is true. He was willing. But the question is, are we willing to do it for him, like Malati Devi was and is?